Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. It's 9:30 p.m. here, Calgary, Alberta time, and we're on for half an hour. This is a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. This is child abuse prevention and human rights abuse prevention is up to us. And I'm glad to be able to do these shows. Glad to be able to continue on bringing out this information to everybody, and hopefully you find it helpful and useful. And I believe education is the key, really, if we're going to stop child abuse. And I just think that we can't talk about it enough. Everyone needs to be talking about it. Everyone needs to get proactive. It doesn't do any good to get mad about child abuse, right? Getting mad and only getting mad and then forgetting about it just doesn't get us anywhere. What we have to do is get busy, and find ways to stop and prevent child abuse, right? And so by becoming educated, it just opens the door to helping these children out here tonight, who are being abused, and just by knowing the signs and symptoms and knowing that it's happening, the awareness, we could prevent a lot of child abuse, right? And a lot of children losing their lives tonight, at the hands of their parents and caregivers, right? So it's so important that we, do continue to look at this and look for ways to change this within our own communities, within our own homes, within our own lives, and get the programs rolling, right? Get programs rolling that are going to work, and new thinkers and new ideas coming in. That's what we really need. So I'm just one more voice. I'm glad to be able to do these shows. I've done about 350 shows, and it's my goal to keep going as long as I can. And as long as I can afford to do it and keep doing it, I'll keep doing it. And, it's just amazing how many people have actually tuned into my shows. When I take a look and see at the numbers there, how many people have listened to my shows. I just thank you all so much for tuning in and listening to me ramble on night after night and morning after morning and day after day talking about child abuse and how we're going, the effects of it and what we need to do to work together to stop this mess, right? So thanks everybody for being here. I'm just a private citizen doing my own shows. I'm not a professional. I don't hold any counseling certificates, therapist certificates. I'm just a private person who pays to do my own blog talk shows. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and it's a volunteer position which I love doing. And it's just great to be able to get this information out to people. I hope to be involved forever, and I hope to until we stop child abuse, and then, of course, then we can all go off and do something else, right? So that's the importance of stopping child abuse. I wish we could stop it tonight. Unfortunately, child abuse and neglect and maltreatment. And if we could stop this tonight, that'd be great, because we could all go on and do something else. And these children out here tomorrow would be guaranteed an abuse-free life, right? And that's what I think that we need to work towards. We need to strive towards, and it can't be put off for another generation. Just can't keep getting put off to the next generation to fix, right? We need to do this. It's up to us, and we're going to have to do it, right? So, thanks everybody for being here and tuning in. It's great. And abuse, the topics of abuse are very sensitive. So anyone who might be uncomfortable, you would not be hurting my feelings if you turn off the show. You have to listen at your own discretion, right? Know what's good for you to listen to, and if it makes you uncomfortable, just turn it off. Now, I've been dealing with child abuse since the day I was born, as I was abused as a child, and so I've been dealing with the consequences of child abuse my whole life, and domestic violence and all of that stuff. So I face it on a daily basis, regardless of whether I do these shows or not. But the whole issue is I thought, well, I just want to be one more voice out there with all the other advocates standing up to say, we have to stop this, we have to change this for these kids out here today and tomorrow and the next day, right? They do deserve to have a good life, and no child should ever be abused, right? So this is why I'm doing these shows. And if you're a young person under the age of 18, I just ask that you have someone listen to the show with you who's older, an older adult. If you have a parent that cares enough about what you're doing online, that would be perfect. Unfortunately, so many times we don't, or they're just too busy or whatever. If you can have someone like a coach, a mentor, a teacher, a counselor, a school, someone who you trust and you think has a good head on their shoulders, you can get them to listen to the show with you, just to see if it's something that you should be listening to, if it's age appropriate. And because I just have no idea where the Blog Talk players are placed around now. These little players can be placed on different websites, and I just don't know where they're at, so I don't know how young the listeners are. And I think this material is very much adult-oriented. And young people, you got to keep yourself safe online. You want to get the information and learn how to stay safe, right? There's so many child sexual predators out there. on any given night, any given day, trying to get a hold of children, right? And they'll do anything. They will come up with the latest stuff because that's what they do. That's what they spend their time doing, trying to get a hold of kids. So make sure you keep yourself safe when you're online. Be careful, very careful in the chat rooms. Know, not to give out any personal information about yourself, including your name, where you live, what school you go to. Never tell them that stuff. Never tell them your real name. Use a fake name when you're in a chat room. Come up with a different name for your computer so that they can't identify you. And never give out your phone numbers, and don't call them because they have caller ID and they can find your number very quickly just by the caller ID, and then they have your number and they can find out where you live. You have to be very careful because children are being killed at the hands of these child sexual predators. If they're not killed, then they're assaulted and their lives will be forever changed. They will never be the same again. They'll lose their innocence and they lose their youth, right? It's just gone. And so you can't ever get that back. So you want to make sure that you keep yourself safe, and fear will not keep you safe. What will keep you safe is education and learning how to keep yourself safe. So just type into your browser, Internet safety for children, online safety, internet safety, things like this, and it will bring up websites full of all kinds of really awesome information about how to keep yourself safe online. It's so important. So if you're a young person listening to this, I hope you will do that and keep yourself safe, keep your family safe, and keep your friends safe, right? So we've been looking at this week and last week an article that I found, it's a PDF actually, from the Child Welfare Information Gateway at www.childwelfare.gov, and it's on neglect. So we're talking about neglect, and that's what I want to continue looking at tonight actually. And I'll give you the link, www.childwelfare.gov/pubs, P-U-B-S, /user manuals, /neglect/neglect.pdf. And we were looking at the different types of neglect, right? And now tonight we're looking at emotional neglect, and I want to continue on with that and just go from there, right? We're on page 20 of this PDF. There's 112 pages here, but I don't know if we'll cover the whole thing. But I just wanted to take a look at neglect because, there's always this whole idea that, people don't quite often, including myself, throw in neglect, right? It's like we just say child abuse. We have to stop child abuse. It's just so much easier to say that. But actually we need to stop child abuse and neglect, because neglect it's actually the most common type of abuse, and it is abuse. And we need to stop neglect as well. And neglect is very, very harmful. It's very damaging, and it can kill children just as much as physical abuse or any of the other types of abuse, and it's more common. It's the most common form of abuse, right? So many kids are neglected, as well as there might be some physical abuse. There might be some child sexual abuse. There might be emotional, psychological, verbal abuse in there as well, and neglect. And so that's why it's so important that we do remember that we have to talk about neglect as well. And so that's why I'm doing this tonight, because I just thought this is such a great article and wanted to take a look at it. So that's what we're doing. And so we'll get right on into that. It's just a lot of good information here. And I'm going to actually pop this link into the chat. And I'll just put that right in there for people so you can see it. And it's really 112 pages, but it's really inclusive. It just talks about everything regarding neglect, right? And it's just very, very good information. Emotional neglect says typically emotional neglect is more difficult to assess than other types of neglect, but is thought to have more severe and long-lasting consequences than physical neglect. It often occurs with other forms of neglect or abuse, which may be easier to identify, and includes inadequate nurturing or affection, chronic or extreme spouse abuse, permitted drug or alcohol abuse, other permitted maladaptive behavior. It encompasses all of that, as well as isolation. So we'll read through there and see what they've written about this. I know all about emotional neglect and all this stuff, right? It's absolutely horrible what it does to children, and if you're a survivor of this, then you would know. And people who have not survived, who have not been through this, this is good information for them, so that, if they know somebody who's actually been through this, they'll know how, what happens to people, right, when they experience this emotional neglect. And quite often, like it says, it comes along with all the other types of abuse, right? So it's just part of it. Inadequate nurturing or affection. The persistent marked inattention to the child's needs for affection, emotional support, or attention. I mean, that's very hard on a child. Children need nurturing, right? Especially little toddlers and little children who their brains are developing, and they need that bond. They need that love from their parents. They need that comfort, the nurturing, the affection. And if they don't get that, they will be lacking seriously, because children, they need that. And it's hard on kids, when they don't get that. They quite often will turn inwards. They'll stop looking for it if it's not there eventually, you know what I mean? And they just become unable to, later on to even recognize that they need nurturing or affection, you know what I mean? It's just become, then when people try to nurture or try to nurture them or try to be affectionate towards them, they generally will push people away. That's what happened to me. And I was just doing what I was taught to do, right? And so it's hard, to overcome that stuff as an adult survivor, right? Chronic or extreme spouse abuse. The exposure to chronic or extreme spouse abuse or other domestic violence falls in there with emotional neglect, and that's hard on kids to see their parents or their caregivers, who's looking after them, fighting and this abusive behaviors going on in the home. Even if the abuse is not directed right at the child, the young child is definitely going to suffer from that, right? Watching their caregivers and parents, fighting, and whether it's verbal or physical abuse going on, very violent behavior and whatnot. It's extremely hard, very psychologically damaging, right? And quite often they say that boys who witness this type of thing will quite often take on the role of the abuser when they get older, because they've seen, that's how they're taught, right? Because children are little sponges, right? So when they grow up around, especially if the boys see a male figure in the home being abusive, they follow that trend because that's their little brains are telling them, oh, this is the way I'm supposed to behave. So they will sometimes, not always, that's true, that's a fact. There's no such thing as 100%. They will sometimes go on to abuse their own families like that, right? Even if the abuse wasn't directed at them, they still suffer from that, right? And so that's why the cycle of violence and the cycle of abuse has to stop, right? So that children don't mimic this stuff and don't bring it on to their own families when they get older and have their own children, right? Permitted drug or alcohol abuse. The encouragement or permission by the caregiver of drug or alcohol use by the child. And I mean, I saw so much of that when I was growing up. It was pretty crazy, pretty wild, Like my parents were not drug users, but my mom used to let my brothers use drugs in order to get back at my dad. So basically she was like, she wouldn't get my brothers any help. She let them, she enabled their habit. Like she wouldn't go get them drugs, and she would take their drugs away from them and stuff when she found them. But my dad would be like, well, those kids, they're just a bunch of no-goods, they're just drug users, they're just this and that, right? And my mom would be like, well, you should just leave them alone, because, my mom loved her sons, and she would kind of use them against my dad, right? Just by allowing them to have this, this behavior, these maladaptive behaviors and drug problems, right? And what it did was kill two of my brothers. One of my brothers died of a drug overdose at the age of 43 in a shelter here in Calgary, and he was always on drugs. He was never a time since he was like 12 years old that he wasn't on drugs, and his brain was pretty much fried by the time he hit 40. And I wasn't surprised, when we got the phone call that he had overdosed, right? Because he had always been overdosing, and it was a miracle that he actually lived to be 43, right? And my other brother died. He committed suicide at the age of 33, and he was a cocaine addict, and he had a lot of problems, a lot of emotional problems and psychological problems and everything else, right? And this is from growing up in the home that I grew up in, right? And they just could not get help. They couldn't figure it out, and there was plenty of times that they could get help because they were both in prison for this and that, and different times serving time and whatnot, and they had counselors and they had therapists there and stuff, but they just could not overcome their problems, you know what I mean? And that's from growing up in the home that I grew up in, and that's precisely why I'm doing what I'm doing, right? To talk about this stuff. It's so important that we get this information out, to people, how serious this is, right? It's killing people. It's killing our children. And if abuse doesn't kill our children physically right now, then 30, 40 years down the road, it very well could, because their lives will be just such a mess. And so this is the problem, right? Abuse kills in every way. It says other permitted maladaptive behavior. That's another form of emotional neglect, is the encouragement or permission of other maladaptive behavior, such as chronic delinquency, assault, under circumstances where the parent or caregiver has reason to be aware of the existence and the seriousness of the problem, but does not intervene. And that was my mom and dad totally, like my brothers were completely delinquent, and not all of them, but at least 3 of them. And just into all kinds of trouble, and they were doing crazy things in the home as well. One of my brothers held a knife to my sister's throat because he wanted her to drive him to do to rob a pharmacy, right, for drugs, right, because he was looking for his next big bags of drugs, right. So he held a knife to my sister's throat and tried to get her to drive him, and she didn't want to do this, So my mom was like, instead of phoning the police, my mom told me to talk my brother out of it. So I had to sit there for like 2 hours and talk my brother down because he was so high, he didn't even know what he was doing. And I told him I had to kind of talk him out of killing my sister, right? And so I did, and he did put the knife down, and my sister did drive him, but she dropped him off sort of close to it and then took off. And of course my mom didn't call the police, right? But my brother got busted that night because he dropped his wallet, and so the police were there and picked him up. But the thing is, this is the kind of stuff that, that parents allow, and then of course it gets the children in trouble and the youngsters in trouble, and these young people, it really messes up their lives, and that's because, if parents don't know how to cope and they can't cope and figure it out, well, the children suffer in every way, right? All the way through. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's absolutely horrible what people will allow and do to their children, right? It's absolutely horrible. Then they talk about isolation, denying a child the ability to interact or to communicate with peers or adults outside or inside the home. That's terrible. Now that I didn't experience, but I know that it does happen, and that's got to be absolutely horrible because children need that interaction with other children their own age, their own peers, and even other adults. Healthy adults who are living healthy lifestyles. They need to see this. They need to be able to see that, hey, that's how other people live too, and it just helps to build their own developmental thoughts on how life is with other people. And children need this. They need to be able to interact, right? So I cannot imagine that that whole isolation thing. That's got to be absolutely horrible. And of course, many parents, if they are abusing their children or neglecting them, they will tell them, okay, this stays in the home. You don't tell anybody about this. And that's what happened to me in my home. We were told that we'd be killed if we ever told anybody. But the thing is it's so hard on children. It's absolutely hard, and this is it. It's reality, and it's so many children's reality tonight, and that's why. That's why this is so incredibly serious. This is children's reality right now, and I wish we could stop it tonight. I really do. Educational neglect is the next portion of this PDF here, and it says, although state statutes and policies vary, both parents and schools are responsible for meeting certain requirements regarding the education of children. Types of educational neglect include permitted chronic truancy, failure to enroll or other truancy, inattention to special education needs, and we'll just look at those quickly. They're not too big. Permitted chronic truancy, permitting habitual absenteeism from school, averaging at least 5 days a month if the parent or guardian is informed of the problem and does not attempt to intervene. And I saw that lots of that when I was growing up, and even in my own family, like my brothers were not, they didn't have to finish school. They just dropped out. One of my brothers graduated actually out of the 4 brothers, and the other 3 did not. And then two of my sisters dropped out, and one of my sisters almost completed high school, but she didn't get her diploma, and so I was the only girl that actually graduated out of 3. So there was only 2 of us out of 7 children that graduated that finished high school, and that's not a very good, number, right? 2 out of 7. But this is the thing. If the parents don't make their kids go to school, and don't care, right, then the kids suffer for that. They suffer for the rest of their lives because they then have to try to make it in a world where, your diploma is important for many good jobs, like really good top-paying jobs, you have to have your diploma, and you want to have some secondary schooling. You know what I mean? And if your parents are not encouraging that, right, and from the beginning, and just letting kids just drop out of school at the age of 10, then there's a real problem there, right? They're not encouraging the child to do the best, to their abilities, to the best of their abilities, to graduate if they can, and go on to have a good life. And so many times, parents who are have mental issues and whatnot like mine, and have so many emotional problems and so many domestic violence going on, and abuse, and they're not thinking about the kid's future at all. As a matter of fact, they're threatening the children's future on a regular basis, and that's what my parents were doing. So they weren't too concerned about the kids going to school, because they were pretty much talking about killing us all the time anyway. And so it's hard on children. It's absolutely incredibly hard, right? And then they quite often they don't care. They just drop out of school and they're like, I don't care, because there's no encouragement at home for a lot of these kids, and they don't feel the need to continue to go to school because they don't feel like they have a future. And that was what was wrong with our family. We were never talking about the future because my parents were always talking about killing the whole family, or killing us, or killing themselves, or whatever, or trying to kill themselves or whatever, right? So that's not a good way to raise children, right? Failure to enroll or other truancy, failing to homeschool, to register, or to enroll a child of mandatory school age, causing the child to miss at least 1 month of school without valid reasons. So there's another one. Inattention to special education needs, refusing to allow or failing to obtain recommended remedial education services, or neglecting to obtain or follow through with treatment for a child's diagnosed learning disorder or other special education need without reasonable cause. That would just be people, this is just neglect. They just, they don't care. Parents, who know their child needs special education, they've been told and recommended that their child have special, treatment, special education because of a learning disorder or whatnot, and then the parents are just like, well, whatever, we don't care. That's sad, because that child is going to suffer. They're always going to be lagging behind, and there'll be a lot of anxiety and stress because the material, they just can't grasp it, and they'll just be held back many times in the classroom, and held back a year or two, because they just can't grasp the material. And had they gotten, some help with their learning disorder, they have the possibility of doing quite well, and not always, because some children just have a hard time learning, and they just some just can't, they just do the best they can, but at least it gives them the opportunity and the chance to do that, right? I think that's so important. Then they talk about newborns addicted or exposed to drugs. It says as of 2005, 24 states had statutory provisions requiring the reporting of substance exposed newborns to CPS. Women who use drugs or alcohol during pregnancy can put their unborn children at risk for mental and physical disabilities. And the number of children prenatally exposed to drugs or to alcohol each year is between 409,000 and 823,000. So this is when this article came out in 2006 or 2008. I think this one came out in 409,000 and 8. That's in between 409,000 and 823,000 children every year are exposed to drugs or alcohol prenatally. Like, that's crazy, absolutely crazy, but it is the truth. One study showed that drug-exposed newborns constitute as many as 72% in hospitals. That is so sad. It's not that baby's fault. You know what I mean? It's not that poor baby's fault that their parents, their mother, or their parents were drug users and substance users and couldn't get off the stuff, and decided to pop out a baby. And people got to start taking personal responsibility. You know what I mean? But it's better that they do leave them in the hospital than take them out and sell them on the street, or for another whatever they're using, right? For whatever drug they're using. Because quite often we see people try to do that, sell their kids for drugs and stuff, which is absolutely ridiculous and sick, right? But these people are sick. Otherwise, they wouldn't be behaving that way. And the children, who pays the price? The children do, right? That's not right. It's not fair. And of course, nobody said life was fair. That's for sure. But we have to do something about this, right? Because no child should have to suffer like that. And if they don't sell them then they just quite often kill them, right? They kill their babies because they send them around because they got to go get their fix, right? Another study found that 23% of children prenatally exposed to cocaine were later abused or neglected, guaranteed, compared with 3% who were not prenatally exposed. So there you go. Well, it's just because, people who are using, especially heavy-duty substance users, they're not going to be concerned with the child. Their main concern is with their fix, their next fix, right? And so, they might even love their children. But that drug has such a heavy-duty grip on them that they cannot help it. You know what I mean? And who pays the price for that? The child does, right? So that's why I never, ever side with the abusers. I always side with the children because abuse is wrong. I don't care what the reasons are behind it. There's no excuse for abuse in my books. As far as I'm concerned, abuse is a choice. And people, we make choices, right? Parents make choices and they choose to abuse. Caregivers make choices, they choose to abuse. Other children and other young people choose to abuse. Daycare workers choose to abuse. It's a choice. They don't have to. Nobody's holding a gun to their head saying, oh, you have to abuse your children. It's a choice people make when they wake up in the morning, how they're going to treat their children. And quite often, people say, oh, well, what if they have mental disabilities? Well, then they need to be responsible and get some help for their mental issues, right? Now, I have two parents who had a lot of mental issues as well as emotional, psychological problems, as well as a lot of hatred because they were both abused as children. Codependent, got into this marriage thinking that each other could help each other, turned into hatred and rage, and then they raised a bunch of kids and abused them as well. I have no soft place in my heart for people who are mentally challenged, and have all kinds of mental issues going on who will not get help. There's help out there. And they were court ordered to get help. They were actually court ordered to go to counseling and get help and treatment, and they didn't follow through with it. They went to a couple of counseling sessions, and they were told that we'd all be removed from the home if they did not comply. Right? This was all court ordered counseling, and they went to 2 sessions. Then we moved out of the country, so that was their way of handling that. So that's the thing. People have a responsibility to their children, and until people start realizing that, and stop thinking to themselves so much here, and realize, hey, I'm responsible for this child, so I need to do the best job I can to bring up this child properly, and give this child a fighting chance to have a good life, right? And I got to show them how to do that by example. So, which means I got to straighten my act up. But too many people just want to continue living the lives they live, their violence and drama and abuse and tears and all this garbage, and causing these kids a lot of dysfunction and a lot of anxiety and a lot of mental problems and emotional problems themselves, and all because the parents would not get help, right? So I don't have any sympathy for abusers, I really don't. Even people who were abused and abuse their children, I just don't have any real empathy for them because they should know better. Abuse is a choice. So I care about the kids. That's what I care about. I don't care about the child sexual predators. I care about the children who they assault and who they kill. I don't care about the parents who are having a hard time coping because they don't have any money and they don't want to hear the child crying. I care about the children. You know what I mean? So I think society needs to start taking it's because children, who has a relationship with these children? Nobody. But these people have friends. So, and they're adults, and adults relate to other adults, right? So it's like people just forget about the kids. It's like, oh, well, who cares about the kids? It's the poor parents or the poor child sexual predators. What are we going to do with them? It's like, who cares? What I care about is these children out here who have no voice, they have no protection, and they are losing their lives left and right. And if they aren't killed at their hands of their parents and caregivers, they're just in the hospital or, laying in their bed or their crib half dead because of the abuse that they're suffering, right? So I care about the kids, and I hope that people will too. And I know that I have a lot of support. I know so many advocates out here, and I just want to say thank you very much for everything that you do, every day, to help make this world a better place for kids and to try to save children's lives and to try to help these kids out. Thank you so much, because that's coming from my heart, man. Because I'm, as a survivor of abuse, I'm very thankful, and I do appreciate everybody out here who's doing anything to stop child abuse and prevent child abuse. So thanks, everybody, for tuning into my shows. I appreciate it. Be back on, let's see, tomorrow morning, one child abuse survivor to another, 6 o'clock a.m., and for half an hour, and then tomorrow night I'm off, but Elizabeth Brawley, she'll be on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio, www.blogtalkradio.com/Dreamcatchers, and you don't want to miss her show. Elizabeth Brawley's a survivor, and she is an awesome lady. She is the Southern Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and she's got some awesome shows on Thursday nights. I hope you will tune in. And I've learned a lot from her, and she's an awesome lady, and I just love her. And then tomorrow morning with my show, and then tomorrow night, and then Friday, you can check my show page and whatnot, and all the different shows that are coming up. And take care of yourselves, everybody. Have a great night. If you need something, get a hold of me on Facebook or Blog Talk Radio here. Send me a message. And just remember, learn the signs and symptoms. Know the signs and symptoms, so that if a child comes to you and you notice some of these signs and symptoms, you would know that's abuse, right? And you could call and you could make a phone call and save that child's life, right? This is so important, right? We have to stand up for these children, and it has to be us. We can't keep putting it off for somebody else, right? We got to save these kids' lives. So thanks everybody for being here, and have a great night. We'll talk to you again soon.